All right, in this lesson, we'll discuss iterating through the groups in a GroupBy object, and we'll do it by doing a sort of real-life example, kind of typical challenge we might face as a data analyst. So I'll begin by re-executing our code, and as we know, we have a sectors object that has our grouped sectors. And if I wanted to do something like extract the companies with the most highest profit per each sector, I know that I have something like sectors profits max, and that would get me the max profit for each sector, but it unfortunately doesn't show me the entire row. So I need some kind of operation if I want to solve this problem where I have to iterate over every single grouping or every single sector, extract the company row with the highest revenue, and then place that company row in a running data frame. So let's begin by actually creating a data frame that's going to store our results. I'm going to call it df, and I'm actually going to call the data frame constructor method directly on pandas. And there's one parameter I want to use here, which is columns. And I'm actually going to give it the columns attribute from my main fortune data frame. And what that's going to do is ensure that our column names are exactly the same as we see up here. So if I preview df below, we'll see it's essentially a blank data frame with all of the columns that we already have. So we're ready to start appending to that data frame and adding each rows. Now the next step is looping through all of our groups and getting the company with the highest revenue for that grouping and then appending it to this running df data frame. So I'm going to want to use a for loop in Python. And whenever you're iterating over a GroupBy object, you have to provide two temporary variable names. The first will be the group, a variable to represent the group, and the second variable will be to represent the actual data frame that's stored within that grouping. So I'm going to call them what they are, which is sector and data. So it's going to iterate over each sector within my sectors GroupBy object, and it's going to return each value, which is each data or each data frame. And I have to specify for that combination in my sectors GroupBy object. Now we know that my data frame for each sector is going to be stored in the temporary variable called data. I just defined it up here. And a method that we can actually call, we can do something like sort values and do ascending and all that. But you may recall we have the nLargest method. That's going to extract the largest values in a data frame. And the first parameter that we can give it is the number of largest values that we want to extract. We just want the top. So I'm going to put 1 and then a comma. And then the second argument is the column from which we want to use the column that we want to use in order to classify what's largest and what's smallest. So I want to use the revenue column within each of our data frames that we're going to get as we loop through this group. So data, again, is just a temporary variable name from each one of our 21 data frames that we're going to iterate over, each one of our 21 sectors in this GroupBy object. And then nLargest is just a method that we're going to call on every single data frame in order to get the row with the highest revenue for that data frame. Now that I'm satisfied, I want to just assign this to a variable to make this process easy. So I'm going to call it highest, I think it's 4 spaces in Python, highest revenue company in group. I'm going to assign that row, and this is going to occur, of course, 21 times, once for each sector. And then I'm going to add it to my df data frame, which is going to store all those values. I'm just going to add that highest revenue company in group, a row. There's going to be 21 rows. They're all going to be added one by one to my df data frame. And unfortunately, this is not a in-place operation, and there's no in-place parameter available. So I always have to reassign my result back to my df variable. So I'm going to execute this. And now if I preview df, we'll see that it's looped through all of these sectors in my GroupBy object. It's found the company in each which has the highest revenue. It's extracted that row, and it's added it to my running df data frame. So now I have a 21 row data frame that represents the highest revenue company in every single one of my 21 sectors. Let's do another example, and it'll also allow us to practice a little bit more with grouping. Let's say I want to find the same thing, highest revenues, but I now want to do it in a city-based analysis rather than a sector-based analysis. So now what I'm going to do is create a variable called cities. I'm once again going to call my GroupBy method, but we're going to call it on our fortune data frame, fortune.groupby. And now if I scroll up, the column that we want to group by is location. Now there's going to be a lot more different values here than we have in sector, but there's still going to be plenty of duplicates, and we can aggregate and summarize based on those common occurrences. So I'm going to group by the values in my location column. And I'm just going to copy this code above here just to create a fresh data frame. I'm going to overwrite my old one. And so now we have our blank data frame in DF. We have a cities group by object, and we're ready to iterate over it in order to get the highest row values in each. Once again, I'm going to write a for loop. We have to begin a for loop with the word for and then temporary variables to represent what we're looping over. When we're looping over a group by object, we have to give a temporary variable to represent each grouping, and then a temporary variable to represent each actual result set or data frame. So in this case, we're looping over each city. So that's our first one. And then a comma, and what we're looping over here is, again, just going to be a data frame. So I'm going to give it a variable name called data. And this is going to be in cities. Once again, data each time around is going to represent my unique data frame for however many cities we have. Once again, I'm going to call my nLargest method. I want to take the top performing result based on the values in my revenue column. And this, of course, can be replaced with anything like profits or employees, whatever you want. In this case, I just want the most revenue. And to make this easy, I'm going to assign it to a variable and call it highest revenue in city. I'm going to assign that row and just that row from that data frame to my variable. And then I'm going to tell pandas that I want to add that row to my running DF data frame. So once again, I'm going to execute. And now if I take a look at DF, you'll see that the locations are going to be listed. They're going to be listed in alphabetical order. And for every single unique location in my original fortune data frame, I'm going to pull the company out that has the highest revenue. So in Akron, Ohio, of all of the companies there that are on the Fortune 1000 that are in Akron, Goodyear Tire and Rubber has the highest revenue, and so on and so forth. So as I scroll down, we can see that this one is a little bit more extensive. There's more groupings here than when we were looking at something like sector, but the same process applies. So for example, if we go to a pretty big city, let's say Washington, D.C., we can see that Fannie Mae, which I think is the housing lender, is the best performing revenue there. So that's how you iterate to groups. It is a classic Python for loop. Perhaps there's a more hidden, convenient method that can be used, but I generally use the for loop. I specify a name for each grouping and a name for each resulting data frame. I then do operations that I want on each resulting data frame, and you're certainly not limited to one row. If you want to take the top two, or if you want to perform some kind of operation and then add those results to a running data frame, you're welcome to do that as well. This is just a simple example. But this allows us to iterate over all those groups, perform simultaneous operations, and then take the combined results back into our own new data frame. And again, this process occurs in just a few seconds, and within basically really 3 lines here, the grouping operation and then the for loop, we're able to extract from this 1,000-row data frame the highest performing company for each city. Kind of impressive when you think about how little code we had to write to make this happen. So that's how we iterate over groups within our GroupBy object.